Everyone, this is Paul Nobles from Eat to Perform, and I wanted to do kind of an interesting thing with this case study because this case study is something that we're doing a lot around the holidays, which is called a stop and go. And the basic idea, and this is actually one of my private clients, and she is an Eat to Perform coach. And she's also an Olympic weightlifter. And so she competes. I think she'll be competing at the American Open, or she may have competed at the American Open. I'm not totally sure. But anyway, she is in a weight sensitive sport. And I'm going to show you something that's real interesting about the decision that she made related to this. But let's go back to right around August when her weight was sort of the highest. Now, you go, well, why would someone want to gain weight? Well, it's very difficult to get strong and build muscle without putting on some measure of weight, right? And so when we look at this period, it also coincided with a lot of strength gains, a lot of work capacity added, and things of this nature. And then, of course, as we went down, she started to be able to use kind of some of that equity that she put in the metabolic bank. Like, a lot of people don't think about this as it relates to metabolism, but metabolism is pretty simple. It's really the amount of muscle you have, the amount of food that you eat, and to a certain extent, the amount of calories that you're burning throughout the day. So there's a lot of people that think, well, I have a broken metabolism, but are they doing what she did here, right? Are they working on that capacity? Are they working on that muscle? And then is food up, right? And so I'll show you what her calories got back up to and things of that nature. So here we go. So let's see here. I just want to go back to the initial fat loss cycle. And so when we look at weight loss, fat loss, the most important thing, as I talk a lot about, is how were you eating before, right? And so let's take a look at what her plan was. So she was at 409 and 72, and I'm not really seeing the actual calories that she was working up to, or that equals, but I'm going to guess that that's right around 2,600. And so when we look at, pulling her down, let's just go. So she was at 2,600, and the first pull down, we gradually pulled her down. So she was at 269.69. Now, the interesting thing about this is that you're not really expecting a lot. Now, her weight was probably a little higher than she'd normally be. It was right at 145. And, the messages definitely started to get of, hey, it's time, right? And she did a real good job of kind of managing that mentally. But let's be real, we all kind of have those numbers that we just don't want to go past. And then you start to look in the mirror and you're not seeing the results of all your hard work. And so, as long as you're not doing that all the time, like it's sort of hard to, let me see if I could find, really the last fat loss cycle would have been somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 months previous to that, right? And so that was another, she really pushed the capacity side. If you look at, where she was around the holidays, she was still kind of playing it real close to the vest, got up to 142. Here she got to 145, right? And so I'll show you what the result has been since then. Now, the other thing that you have to remember in this scenario is that this is a very lean person already. She's already got a lot of muscle. She's 5'3". A lot of people have put like these, qualifiers on their progress, and you can't imagine that at 5'3" you can be pretty lean. Well, there's a lot of people that are 5'3" and pretty lean that are, much higher than this weight. I can think of Carl Webb from the CrossFit Games as a great example of someone who's, I believe Cara's like I think she's Cara Saunders now, but Cara's like 155, and she's 5'2", 5'3", so you can be very lean at these numbers, just a matter of how much you're working on muscle and are you doing things like this, right? So she got to that point in August. We started to bring her down, and we started a little bit higher than let's see here. I'm just trying to go through where we ended up. So towards the end of her fat loss cycle, we brought things down to 209, 69, 54. That's not really super aggressive. There's probably some people that are like, whoa, what the heck? She, is using a lot of capacity, right? Most of the time. It's much more important to her to be good at the weightlifting part and the American Open part than it is to have abs, as an example. So, she's not going to want to go too extreme, and I'm going to give you a great example of that here real soon. So what's interesting is that you can sort of see the meal that she posted. You can do that in the new app, which is really cool. I see a lot of people actually posting their workouts, like screenshots from Modify and stuff like that. That's always cool. A lot better than typing it out. You can kind of see that, she's, kind of uses our journal as a way of kind of get her thoughts on paper. But we got down from 145. I don't know if you saw that, but she was at 145 at her highest, and now she's at 137. And we're starting to see food come back. And even this is really the interesting part. When we talk about food coming back, the food came back to where she was right at the beginning of fat loss. And her weight is still kind of at the lowest of the lows, right? We ended fat loss at 137. Here, food is coming back, and she's still using that work capacity, and weight went down. Doesn't mean that weight doesn't fluctuate, because the very next day she's at 138. But fluctuating weight and then 139. So that might have been, one of those moments where she's having date night or something of that nature. And, literally she's dealing with kind of these big swings. So the very next day she's 136.8. So here's what she did at that point that I think is interesting. And, she's showing me progress pictures just to see, how things came along. And she's pretty happy with the result at that point. And we started to, at this point, this is the interesting part. This is the stop and go part. Instead of moving from AP to the second fat loss stage, we actually moved to recomp, knowing that in October we would move back to fat loss. So she did fat loss 2. And you'll see I didn't get really super aggressive with her, even in fat loss 2. But we started fat loss 2 because she had family coming in and some obligations that she didn't want to be eating a lot less. And so she entered fat loss 2 at 139.2. She's currently in fat loss 2, right? And so we brought her down to 199.64.49. This is the lowest that she's been up to this point. And soon after, fat loss 2 is really short. You can see she's at 136.6 now. She kind of came in with a running start at 139.2. And right at ETM3, I asked her if she would be interested in pulling macros down further. And this was her response. No, I would not. And I would say probably 97% of the people would pull down in that instance. And in that instance, they may have higher expectations than they should probably have, because realistically, if we're going to pull calories down, I mean, if we pulled calories down, it's going to come down either 30 or 40. For carbohydrates, that's only, 120 calories, and then, it would basically be 3 or 4 fats. So you're looking at another 156. So the total being 156 calories overall. So you're not going to see this huge, weight loss, but it's just kind of gradually moving you down, kind of helping you with this discomfort. But she did not choose to do that because she wanted to kind of keep with the capacity of her work. She did mention that mentally, this was actually the part that I thought was the most interesting, and something that I think everybody needs to kind of pay attention to. If your sleep is bad, if you are struggling, if overall things are not headed in the right direction, you want to make sure that you're making the right call. Just because you think that those extra 30 carbs or whatever is going to help you a lot, it's not going to make that big of a difference. Really, we're looking just to grinding down a couple more pounds so we can set that floor a little bit lower, because as you can see with her file, food still fluctuates, right? Weight still fluctuates in this scenario. So she, went through fat loss 1, weight is still fluctuating here. And, even in this scenario, you can kind of see where it started to get a little bit harder after about a month of having food back. Let me just see where food ended. Once the food came back. Yeah, so you can kind of see that she didn't get back to that 409 level, but I did something a little bit different for her, where we talked about adding a little bit more fat, just because she doesn't do a lot of super high intensity work or long endurance where you'd be drilling into those glucose levels, and I actually like the result of that for her. Right? So now, here we are. We're basically about a week and a half into the second fat loss phase. She's got, a few more, a week and a half left to go. Now, what's the expectation? I've set the goal at 134.9 for her. She did mention that it would have been nice to pull things down to potentially get down to that lower weight class. I have a lot of thoughts. We could do a whole video just on that, but I applaud her for not trying to do that, because one of the things that we've seen, she's already got a lot of muscle. You can see that in her progress pictures. She's a relatively lean person. We don't really want to be digging into that muscle. And what happens for a lot of people in weight restricted sports is they sort of use this as an additional excuse to diet a lot, right? And so, sorry about that. The fact that she didn't and was able to kind of mentally have the right frame of mind. Sorry, I can't close that without showing you guys some internal stuff. So I'm just going to actually shut down. We kind of finished this off. Sorry that we had that little cricket interruption. But I think this is a good way, My final point, of course, is that if you're in these weight restricted sports and you don't do what she did here, where her weight went up and then she allowed herself to kind of deal with that, you're probably not progressing the way that you would like. And I would say that this is similar for CrossFit. I would say this is similar for runners. You really have to have those periods where you're kind of working on that capacity. Hope this is helpful, and talk to you guys later, or talk to everyone later. I hate saying you guys, and my wife constantly gets on to me about that.